My name is Ross Smith. I'm a partner with PA Consulting Group. I have been for 16 years, and I've been working in the utility space for 25 or more years. Oh, sound old when I say that? And a lot of what I get involved in is helping lead work around what you hear, of course, all the time now: digital transformation, digital change, digital implementations. So we're going to have a little bit of an upfront discussion, sort of what exactly that is, sort of the context in utilities and the shape of it, because of course digital transformation and change is not happening just in utilities. It's happening across all industries and sectors, some farther ahead than others. But what it means for a utility leadership, for executives, for employees, for customers. And we're going to talk mostly today about sort of enabling that, what would be called a strategic roadmap in traditional lingo, and some of the challenges that, and opportunities, but challenges that utilities are having, and that I'm going to give you a framework around which we're going to have a conversation. And then in each of your tables, we're going to have segments where we're going to have a bit of a round table conversation. So this is about enabling that conversation amongst yourselves, and hopefully learning quite a lot from each other, and where some of the dominant issues, challenges, opportunities, directions are, in using the framework that I'm going to show you. I say the word framework, that sounds sophisticated. The nice thing about this is it's not sophisticated. It's quite straightforward and simple. And my experience with large-scale change within utilities is that often the challenges aren't around the complex technology or advanced technology. It's about general hygiene of structuring and running and managing complex programs within an environment that, although utilities have been going through change, of course, for decades, it's different kind of change now, and it's not just implementing data and technology changes. These are changes to sort of the DNA of the organization as to how it works, how it interacts internally, and moving away from those traditional organizational silos, and thinking differently. So this was the summary of, which I guess attracted you guys here, or my picture did. The summary that was in the on the website, and again, looking at change within an organization in digital holistically. A lot of what we see is very siloed, project-based work happening in utilities, which is partially a function of the linear budget planning that happens and regulated utilities and how that has traditionally happened. So it's to turn things on its head a little bit and think a bit differently. And we use the term sort of total digital as opposed to just pockets of project digital. And we'll go through that. Okay. So first, a bit of context, and I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm assuming you guys operate and live in a utilities world, so none of this is rocket science to you in the sense of what these topics are. But this just represents sort of the big shift that's happening from a digital perspective and broken out into the sort of aspects of a utility. So customer-led digital channels is a relatively obvious one, I think. There's a huge amount of change happening in terms of how you reach and interact with customers. An example would be proactive outage notification. For some utilities, that's an easy no-brainer. Been there, done that. For others, that is a monumental lift for them to be able to achieve. Something that from a customer perspective, to get a text message seems so straightforward, but to the utility perspective, given their silos, their data, the way they're structured, it is a really complicated thing to achieve. We hear the term digital worker more and more. So this is about the employees in the office, in the field, and how they're being enabled, and how technologies like cloud, big data, mobile, wearables, how are those being applied both in the office and in the field? Modernizing the grid, of course, grid mod. Digital twins, it's interesting. I have one client, New York Power Authority, where digital twins is a way of life for them now, but for distribution utilities, trying to find the application and with digital twin concept is not quite there yet. Integrated Operations Center, so this unifying of all these different functions that digital technologies and capabilities allow you to do. And I'm sure you hear AI all the time, predictive analytics, machine learning, all the buzzwords out there around digital, but what do they really mean to the business, and how can you look at structuring that over taking advantage of those things, not just pockets of technology or little pilots, but actually look at it holistically from a utility perspective in the long term. A question to you, that covers a broad spectrum, I know, but a question to you guys is there anything glaringly missing in your world that you would have expected to see up there?
I wouldn't say glaringly missing, but robotics.
Okay. Do you mean physical robotics or RPA, robotic process automation?
Probably a little of both. It's evolving theme that I've seen over the course of the last couple of years.
Yep, okay, great. And one kind of category of that, and I know there's quite a lot of application of drones happening now, and the drone part, even though a few years ago was kind of cool and new and everything, that's kind of the easier part now. It's how to take advantage of that data and use it for business value that I see sort of from a robotics perspective. Okay, anybody else before we move on? That's just setting the context. I hope none of that should come as a surprise to the people that's in this room anyway. So one of the things I wanted to, just before we dive in, what is a digital utility? So when we're talking about digital transformation, what's the end state? What would you actually kind of describe it as, or how is it different? So when I talk to some people, we're going digital because we're implementing new technology and we're using our data differently. Okay, but I would put that on the low end of maturity of an explanation. Really, it's that DNA change. So the simplest explanation I come up with is, Facebook started in the digital age. It operates in its DNA, how they deliver work, how they interact with each other, how they communicate, how they think about their customers, in a very different way than a lot of traditional utilities do. I know it's pointing out the obvious, but it's trying to draw that contrast where utilities really aren't just, and shouldn't be just, looking at technology projects that get implemented and automate a few processes or provide some basic new capability that's a bit easier on the OpEx. It's really looking at changing the way the culture works, how innovation comes into this, how's organizational agility. Those are the kinds of things we mean when we talk about this. So you'll see the word evolution up there. A lot of the conversation we're going to have today is, transformation projects, right? That's the way it's talked about in the industry. We have a program of work that's transforming us. We look at it a bit differently, that really it is this evolution toward a new way that the organization is going to be structured, rather than just changing parts of it. So we're going to talk about organizational agility, and this is enabling that strategic roadmap. So I don't know how many smiles I'll get when I say it. So a lot of utilities that I engage with say, yep, we're agile, we do agile really well, and then we have a conversation about it, and they've trained 50 people in IT, and they went on a 3-day course, and now they're agile. That's not really organizational agility. So it is a very different thing when you change it to the organization from just pockets of agile. And by the way, at any point, if I stray into an area that isn't your realm and you want some clarity or talk about, if anyone's thinking what's agile, I hope not. But if there is, then let me know and we can have that conversation. So this other concept of a digital operating model, and this is a real challenge, again, on looking at when you're layering in new technology. My experience with utilities is to get very focused on the technology, working with the SI on how to just get it kind of bolted into their business, because they have a timeline, a schedule, and a budget, and it becomes very much a project-based kind of approach, without really thinking about, okay, well, how would we actually modify our underlying operating model, both in IT, within the business, that really takes advantage of those technology investments. So sometimes they're just at the process level, and they really don't take a hard look at, we're just layering stuff across our already siloed, fragmented business. What are the customer touch points? How we align those? Yep.
And so one of the things is the interoperability piece. So the business is driving, hey, we need this or we need that from kind of an experience perspective for the group.
Yep.
But from an IT perspective, they have to look at how does the new technologies that we're considering, dovetail into what we have, and not just what we currently have, but what does it look like as it relates to our trajectory,
Yep.
if you will. So.
Good point. Yep. Absolutely. And it's those tensions too that create some of the challenge. And of course, look, to be honest, right, the end of the day in an organization, particularly utilities, seem to exhibit this a lot more, but people are people and they're sitting in their certain functions and silos, and when you start saying, hey, we're going to move the map around a little bit and you're going to move over here and we're going to take your team here because it makes more sense. It's easy to write that down on a PowerPoint slide and move the boxes, not so easy to actually make it happen and make sure you have the right people in the right place. So that digital operating model, to define it, not that hard. To implement it and make it work, you got people involved, so it gets a little harder. And that, again, talks about total digital evolution, trying to step out of, I have a digital program of work, it's a $100 million program around ADMS and grid mod, that's what I'm doing. It's thinking about it, across the organization and not enabling one part of the organization but then losing out because you didn't support or consider another part of the organization. It's to take it up that level. And a good portion of what I see a lot, and what I'm hoping this is a pragmatic, kind of practical conversation we can get into in a minute, is actually how do you do this stuff? And how do you actually make it happen without having multiple change orders or staff changes in turnover or missed delivery dates in terms of go live or lack of user adoption? There's all these things that happen in these large complex programs. But what are some of the things we can proactively address to minimize that risk? And that's a good portion of what I want to kind of take you guys through today, I hope. And hopefully amongst yourselves, as we go through this, a lot of good sharing of lessons learned and how you're addressing certain areas. And see if there's some common themes, which I believe there are, across a number of organizations. So we're going to move kind of behind that high-level strategic waving in the air, kind of pie in the sky, digital stuff. And as I said, really focus on some of these tangible things. So my hope is you walk out of here today with some really good insights about where and how others have tackled certain challenges and problems in their digital transformation journey that they're on. Because some are quite far ahead and would rather have known a few things maybe a year or two ago or three, and others are still getting started and can learn from those others. So that's the first one. What did you guys think you got right, and what are the typical challenges in a utility context and environment? I already mentioned one of them being linear budget planning and stage gates, how those just are structured and have been in forever there, and how those bump up against trying to do things in a truly agile way is one example. What enablers would exist in your utility that can be leveraged and exploited? And blockers may be a negative way to describe it, but here we're thinking of, and I'll give you an example. I have I help executives lead large programs, and some of the things that just drive them bananas in a utility, I hope we don't have any procurement people in the room, but procurement and procurement process, when they're trying to move quickly and they're being pressured and they've got part of their organization that just doesn't work that way. And so you can get frustrated by it or recognize it when you're establishing your program of work and how you're going to lay out your strategic roadmap, and recognizing how to either augment it or work around it. But simple things, onboarding people and the security badging process. You're trying to onboard all these people to get this big program of work moving, and it takes 6 months to get them a badge. They can't even get in the building. Those are practical little, and they sound like small little things. But our experience has been none of these programs fail from one big thing. They're all death by 1,000 cuts. So hopefully we can get some of those out on the table today that are not going to be fatal to any particular program, but taken collectively, if you don't address them, can definitely, the patient will bleed to death. It's a very common thing we see. Any questions? I'm going to introduce you to the framework. Okay, and I did tell you framework's a big fancy word for what it really is, but its simplicity hopefully is what you'll find helpful. So this is structured as a pyramid with a recognition. So let me just frame this for you. So this was born out of conversations with multiple different utilities running large complex programs where things weren't going well. And I can share these slides with you, be happy to send them to you all. This is born out of that, which everyone had a reason why it wasn't working. You know, our change management capability, they just do PowerPoint slides and don't really engage with frontline staff, so it's not really helping enable change. Or our PMO is not a PMO, they're just a bunch of status takers who, get in our way. They don't actually enable this to happen. Our leadership, do we have the right people in the right roles? Bob just got put in that role because Bob was free, but he's not the right person, to have the right capabilities and skills. They throw a whole bunch of stuff at us, and we were trying to separate out, okay, what's really important here? And where should we focus to really get this program back on track? Or at the early stages of a program, make sure you have a solid foundation and what some of the key things are. So there's not a lot of rocket science behind this, but if you think about it from the bottom left, the vision of tomorrow and how it connects to the ultimate customer value that you're trying to deliver. So a challenge in your own head for a moment is think of a digital program of work perhaps you're involved in at your utility. Can you articulate the vision of tomorrow and how that links to customer value? It's just a narrative explanation, and you'd be surprised when we ask that question in a room full of executives. You get 6 people around the table, they all articulate it differently. So having that one, vision and focus of why we're doing this and what we're trying to achieve and how that's going to deliver customer value sounds so simple, but it's so important. So that's where it kind of starts. But then, of course, a typical business case or strategic roadmap, a lot of people look at those as funding mechanisms, right? Let's slap a bunch of things down on the page. We'll promise a bunch of benefits we may or may not be able to deliver. We'll see if we can make some estimates around CapEx budget planning and where we're going to put money in future years. And it kind of all gets hacked together. So you've got the shaky foundation of this complex program right from the start. So these areas of the CapEx, OpEx budget, and some things we see is the OpEx tail on these big programs. A lot of people focus on the capital and minimizing the OpEx. They don't think through, you got to feed and water this thing once you're done, and what's the OpEx tail look like. So we're going to have a conversation around that in a moment, but that's the foundation. If you have problems down at the bottom of the pyramid, they will permeate up through the rest. If we move to the next layer, from a governance perspective, of the ones that I find the most dominant is decision making, or the lack thereof. So there seems to be a cultural thing within some utilities that decision making is a consensus driven thing that goes around in circles. I don't know if this is familiar in your organization. How a decision gets made, who makes it, and how quickly they happen can create a huge drag on the program in this transformation journey because everything just spins in circles. And agile maturity or delivery maturity, the manner in which delivery of what's happening has been defined. Those two things in particular at the governance level can have a huge impact. Change in communications. So again, if you don't have the governance model right, you're not making decisions, you're not executing properly, you don't have the right people in the right seats. Then we move to the next level, and we divide change into the program team. So how you create and drive a high performance team has a focus around managing that, as well as what a lot of people focus on is change impact assessments, change, I've seen billions of slide decks that describe the change that really has no bearing on the reality of what's going to happen to frontline people and how to address that. But You can get that wrong too, but it doesn't matter if you get it wrong if all that's wrong too. And then finally, executive steering and reporting. You need to make sure you've got that right and clear lines of sight with the executive team and their accountability. So what we're going to do, and what we typically do with this, is we say, okay, we're going to start at the bottom. I'll do this. We're going to start at the bottom, and this is what we're going to do for 10 minutes or so, is within your groups, the question is, which of these areas below would you pick? So you could say this one, and this one are the three most important ones, and the three, and why are those important, or why are those a challenge, and which of them are not well defined, and happen to introduce delivery risk. So you can't pick all of them. They're all important, but you can't pick all of them. You can only pick three, and just the discussion for 10 minutes amongst your table is whether it's a program of work that's in planning, that's in flight, that maybe already happened. What we're trying to expose here is if there's any common learnings in these areas that everybody gets scope wrong, for example. It is always underplanned, which has an impact on the budget, which has an impact on the end users because I don't know what they're going to get. That's the kind of conversation to have amongst your table and see if we can, at the end of 10 minutes, see if there's some commonality across the tables. Does that sound fair? So if you haven't, and introduce yourselves. I did tell you we were going to do some work in here. No, come on in. So if you want to just introduce yourselves, and then it's just an open discussion for 10 minutes. I've put some Post-it notes on the table for you if you want to be able to jot stuff down or move them around as you talk through, question 1 and 2. And these are kind of the sidebar if you happen to talk about things that are really helped make it work. I don't know, the resource competencies and capacity. I don't know, maybe your HR team engaged well and you have a really good understanding of the skill sets and you were really thoughtful about who you seconded onto the program or how you qualified people when they joined or onboarded them. Those are the kind of things, just through conversation, hopefully we can get some ideas. Everyone cool? Make sense? All right, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. And then we'll ask 2 of the tables just to read out for 3 or 4 minutes what you guys talked about and what you might have covered. Okay? Set a timer for 10 minutes.
Setting. Okay, 10 minutes and counting.
Sorry, I just walking down my stuff there. My name's Paul. I'm from Endeavour Energy in Australia.
All right, guys. Just in the interest of time, hopefully that was I know a short conversation, but focusing kind of on the bottom here. I was going to start with the table at the back. If anyone wanted to volunteer, was there any common themes in your conversation around these areas? So if you had to pick any of these boxes as the top ones, did any of those float to the surface?
I don't think we came up with anything on the list, but I know the conversation. Well, I think one of the things that my observation was everybody really focused immediately on the risk because in each of these areas, there's a lot of uncertainty in how you would do things. Although, I think it was very clear everybody knows we need to do something. My personal observation is I think utilities do a very good job of forecasting needs for the population and their consumers, so that part could be clear, but how to do it isn't clear on any of those areas.
Got it. Okay. Anything else from the back table to contribute, or?
Please do, I didn't mean to.
No, that's good.
All good. No, open dialogue here, guys. We're just trying to learn from each other. This table, anyone want to?
Yeah, I think for us, there was a couple of things. I think the one that was really pivotal to our conversation is the vision of tomorrow, is really understanding the why of the customer. What is it we're trying to fulfill in terms of their preferences and their needs, and not having that information to make sure that customer experience is optimal.
Got it. So, observations just that we often hear or see, and I'll give you a challenge in a minute post this workshop once we finish this whole thing. But again, if this is wonky and not right and not agreed and not clear, everything else becomes hard. And, you know, as I heard some of the conversations, scope, if you have clear scope that's clearly linked to the benefits, and then they cut the budget, or say go faster, then scope gets cut, which impacts benefits, you know, these are all interrelated. And what we often see, and I suppose one of the things to take away from this, and again, it sounds obvious when you say it out loud, you have to get all of these things right, and one impacts the other. But in times of delivery and when everyone is stressed out, typically money floats to the surface. And that becomes the conversation. What can you achieve for the money that we actually have now that we've overrun, now that we don't have this? Then it's, well, we need to cut scope to meet schedule, which impacts the users, or the functions of the system, which impacts the benefits, which impacts the client value. But all of that conversation is sort of rushed through. It's just, what are we going to do to get this thing done? And that happens a lot. Is that a common, would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not alone. That is a very common thing that we see. So my challenge to you, just if you think through, see, the other thing we would do with an executive team if we were running through a program like this is separately in the room, we would say, all right, everyone do 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, 10 being this is rock solid, on each of those boxes. So you'll get some executives saying scope is a 2, and the guy sitting beside him or the girl sitting beside him says it's a 10. So it's just an understanding across even the executive leadership team of this program, an understanding of the program. So when those things are fundamentally not clear in the minds of the folks who are supposed to be leading this effort, that creates a lot of challenge. Okay, did any blockers or enablers come up? I use procurement as an example, not to bash on procurement people, but they can create a drag in the program. Change management organizations can. EPMOs, I hear this a lot. You know, we have an EPMO and it's great, and it's not. No one's willing to say. An enterprise PMO. So it's a great concept. We're running a bunch of complex programs. We need an enterprise PMO with good rigor and standards. And often the execution of that turns into a bunch of templates and stuff that just gets done, and a whole bunch of people are running around filling in forms without actually adding any value or delivering anything. Not their fault per se, but that inevitably is sort of what we see within the utility organization as sort of a natural byproduct, I suppose, of the culture to a degree. Oops. So if we move up one, and we're going to do this, this is a really critical part. So the business case, as we just, right, you got to know the scope, the schedule, you got to have it locked down, what you're trying to achieve, well communicated, that's foundational. But if you get that right, at least in the beginning of the program, the next part becomes actual execution and how you're going to do this. So leadership, decision making, I'll say agile maturity because that's typically the direction most of these digital programs go in terms of adoption of agile or hybrid agile. There's all sorts of variations on that theme, and also often done with an organization that doesn't know how to do agile, never done it before, went on some training, and it creates a huge set of its own issues. And then PMO, whether it's an ePMO or an actual PMO, again, it's that the application of tools and templates does not deliver value. How does that PMO interact with the program to actually add value and drive it forward? So maybe we'll just do 8 minutes, but a conversation around this, and I'm going to lead you a little bit. So the right people in the right roles, we get asked questions about, do we second people out of their current jobs onto a digital program? Or do they just do it as part of their day job? They're a SME, partially on that. A structural thing as to how you set it up, but from a leadership perspective, it's important. And then it's the right people in those roles who actually care about it and want to get it done. These are hard, complex programs. You have to have people that are committed and don't just see it as one other thing on their plate that doesn't matter. Decision making, I would encourage you to have a good conversation about how decisions on a program are actually made, especially when it comes to, do we reduce scope, do we change the schedule, do we add money, how do we do all of this, and how does that happen, and how quickly does that happen? Because decision making is one of the fatal big cuts that can really create a problem on a big program. So a couple more minutes. We'll just do 8 minutes. If you guys want to talk about these boxes in particular, and then we'll ask the other two tables. There, you got a heads up. To read out to the group in terms of where you thought, if you were going to influence one of those boxes and you saw it as critical, which one would it be and why? And have a conversation about that. Does that make sense? Everyone? Okay. All right, one more minute.
So I'm curious about.
All right. So I'm curious, so why don't we start with this table in terms of the governance layer. Anyone want to feedback your conversation to us?
Sure. So we start with the decision-making piece of the puzzle because of the fact that any projects and efforts that you undertake for digital or any of the strategic effort, it's going to impact already planned capital and O&M. And so to ensure that you have kind of multiple layers of approval, or you have kind of a senior layer of leadership that helps with prioritization of efforts, understanding the impacts to the organization before it goes higher up the chain for final approval. Because then you start talking about, once you approve something new, if you have a tight budget, what's going to happen is something else may have to come off. And so that's where those multiple layers come into play, because you get everyone's buy-in. As you come up with ideas kind of at your working group level, you have to get buy-in all the way up your chain. And so by doing that, you kind of ensure everybody's in the boat together and everybody's rowing together, right? And so when it impacts the capital and O&M, everybody's in agreement. So the other thing that we talked about too was in regards to when you're looking at projects and efforts from an agile perspective, having the right individuals in the room that can make decisions about processes and things like that. But that does not eliminate the need for approvals and buy-in. So.
Got it. Anything else from the table? We'll ask for the other table, and then I'm going to jump back to a few of the things you said there are really, really relevant in terms of what's up here that no one's spotted just yet. So the table at the back?
Yeah, I think very similar around
Decision making was the main topic of our conversation, and having clarity around who is making decisions up front as part of a project structure, and being able to make those decisions quickly. And gave some examples of a current SAP implementation that we're going through that's somewhat stifled by decisions that are quite slow. So understanding who's going to make those decisions and how those decisions are going to be made, but also that understanding sitting, I guess, in some of those ones on the lower tier, so everybody actually understands the goal and the vision of where we're trying to get to. So I think that was a key thing. And then we talked a little bit around leadership as well, and having the right people in the right roles, and having people understand the priority of the work that they're given when people get a project as part of their their day-to-day role as well. Being able to make those decisions and understand the organisation's overall priority around where to put resources when they're constrained.
Got it. Anyone else want to throw anything in? I'm going to kind of talk about this a little bit in the context of organizational agility and at the portfolio level. If anyone wants to say anything, then you can delay that conversation for a minute. Okay, so it's really interesting. So here's my observation, and you'll notice PMO, Agile Maturity are both up here. Now, in a traditional utility setting, you will find an enterprise PMO, project management office in some fashion, or there's a new PMO set up for each major program or what have you. If you're doing true Agile at scale, as opposed to just at the team level of Scrum teams or even just at the program level, you're truly doing it at the portfolio level. And we're talking portfolio, we're talking about all of the programs of work that are happening at the utility. So what should happen, the PMO ceases to exist if you've done Agile at scale correctly. It gets subsumed in because they're at odds often in a traditional PMO approach and very linear project view versus how you look at agile at scale, which is really interesting. And then when you talk about layers of decision making and those people involved, I was telling this table a great example. So it makes perfect sense. The actual execution and implementation of that thinking, particularly by the PMO folks who think, okay, we need an executive steering committee to decide these things, and they create a little charter and the things they're going, the RACI of what they're going to be responsible for. Then they create a business steering committee that has SMEs representing multiple operational functions, so they get their say. And then they create another one that's at the project level, and they're going to meet every 6 weeks. They're going to meet every 4. They're going to meet every 2. And then they lay it all out, and you're in the program trying to make a decision about something critical. And you have to go through 3 levels or wait 6 weeks to get to the executive steering committee. And your program's 27 weeks long or something. 6 weeks is a long time. So sometimes the actual execution of what seems like good logical thought has the unintended consequence of making things really complicated and hard. So getting all of those things right and learning and figuring out in a linear budgeting model where typical capital budget is allocated 5 years out and it's in this line item, and to your point, you're making those decisions. Okay, that one we're going to de-scope or push it out to year 7 because we're going to move this one forward and all that kind of stuff. The challenge I see within the utility environment is that schizophrenia situation right now where they need and want to have that true organizational agility at the portfolio level, but they're butting up against the cultural, structural way in which they've always operated, and making that transition is really hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how do we trim the fat of all those? Sorry, right here.
Oh, jeez. Someone hiding under the table?
So like you said, most programs, projects, whatever, I mean, you have committee here, committee there, committee over there. How do you trim that fat out to, make it clear and simple?
So it's a great question. So the pragmatic answer is, so there's 2 answers, 2 things I see. Either the senior executive have recognized this and are true believers and champions, and this does not happen often. Tennessee Valley Authority is one I can think of that has made some real strides. No, they're not there, but they've made real strides in that area from an adoption perspective. So that's one, is when it's driven from the top and you can get some trim the fat because it's being driven from there and they get it.
Correct.
The other is, and this is it's the world you live in and you pick your battles, is you say, my program of work, this 100 million, 50 million, 10 million, whatever it is, your digital program, you do take a siloed view, you're laser focused, and you say, we're going to do it differently. The hardest part, and I've some of the clients I work with, they've said, look, I don't want to work with the EPMO and our enterprise change people. They're all lovely people, but they're not going to get me where I need to be. But I can't ignore them because politically I can't do that.
Well, and see,
So you pick your battles and you...
I think that's the problem is because, part of having all those multiple groups, which are a pain, is you're trying to get buy-in to the different areas of the company. And you're right, part of it is a political move at the time.
Yeah. That's it. As I said earlier, the people part of all of that, and who's, the EPMO person now, you're saying, well, I'm going to go hire my own project managers or whatever it is, and they're saying, well, that's what I'm here for, and I have them, and you have to use mine, and here's the templates we're going to use. I mean, some of the things I see, my favorite was one program, they made that choice. They're like, we just got to get this done. We're going to write, I can't remember specifically what the document was. It was a, let's just say it was a status reporting approach they were going to use. Well, the EPMO came along, and this is a true story. It was 6 months later, and they're like, you have not been using the right template. You need to use the right template. And for the project documentation, you have to go back 6 months, and for every one of them, you need to translate it all into the template. So
what are your
an SI on the ground was pretty happy with a change order that put 2 analysts cutting and pasting into it, which adds no value whatsoever. That's the kind of stuff, personally, that blows my mind.
So what are your thoughts on streamlining critical communication from team to team so that decision making can be more efficient?
So if you're familiar with, so from an agile perspective, some of the principles and approaches. That's something called PI planning, a program increment, which is 3 months, and you rent or get into a huge conference room covered with walls and Post-it notes, and you break down the barriers of communication because you put everyone in the same room. And that evening, they go drink beer together. You'd be surprised. It blows me away when I see these happen because it's so complex. You walk in and so many things, but just having those teams communicate. But then you, of course, oh my God, well, how much is it going to take to rent that room for a day? And we're flying people in because you don't want to do it with remote people. You know, you want people co-located for this kind of thing. Comes with a price tag, but it's so cheap to do that kind of thing. I was just it was interesting. It wasn't a utility, it was a robotics company in Davis, California. And it was amazing. On their huge wall, they have 75 people every Monday morning that get up and stand in front of this enormous, they're building a subsea robotic, which is really cool. But it's amazing hearing the conversations happen and the connections. And that's something I don't think utilities have, got right in terms of cubicles and rooms, and you're emailing the person who's down the hall. You should get up and go talk to them. So I don't know if that answered your question. To me, it's enabling face-to-face interactions, removing the PMO heavy, we need this document. It's not the focus on documents, and it's on human interaction. Okay. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wrong way. Okay. Why is that not there? Here we go. So we're just going to do 4 or 5 minutes on this one. So there's 2 schools of thought with change management and communication. One school of thought is it's all squishy and soft and people should just deal with it. This is happening. Right? And the other is a genuine engagement with people and bringing them along the journey. And my experience is when you talk budget, scope, money, resources, the first place that it gets taken from is there. And that is one of the most dominant places you should not take it from, and there should be a genuine focus. Having said that, the genuine focus is not a bunch of slide decks with color coding on who's impacted that go to the executives to tell them about the impact or the change, but actual communications and engagement with the frontline people who are involved in the change. So from a digital program perspective, again, it's very high touch, and that's a discipline. I'm not so good at it, but it is a discipline that when you're good at it, it really makes a difference. So can we take just 4 minutes or so? And by the way, we divide these things into 2. This is the high performance delivery team, the people who are involved day by day actually pushing all this forward. And these are the impacted business units and the people whose job is going to change, disappear, move, shift. Often there's a lot of focus on change and comms outward from the program, but in the program, especially complex programs, there's not a lot of attention paid. And if you really want, to your point, a well-connected team that's operating at a high level, you need to focus on how you're managing the change within the team as well, and communications to the team. Okay, 4 minutes? Does all that make sense? Right. So I'll also say this. If anyone has a really positive change management experience they want to share, that would be great, I think, for all of us to hear. And what made it a positive experience? I'm going to ask the table at the back if, from a conversation perspective around this, you had anything to share that you felt was common or different or...
Well, I guess from one perspective, when I look at that, I just see standard strategy, program office management sort of stuff, delivering a program. It's one of the points I was trying to make was, or that we discussed around here was, utilities typically take incremental steps forward. And it's because they collectively get together and talk to each other about these steps, with a visionary leader or someone over the top telling them where they should go. But then it gets hedged, it gets moved into something that everyone's comfortable with. So if you're going to take a utility to a digital future, there's got to be another box in there in terms of your influences from outside, your tech companies, know, it's a little bit like Jobs of iPhone when they asked him, how do you survey your customers on what they want? And he said something like, they don't actually know what's possible. So that's what's missing for me up there is you've got to get those external environments. You've got to get your customers in there as well, your technology companies, your universities, even your regulators, because regulators are so slow in most cases, to be part of that change group and get those inputs.
Great, absolutely. In terms of, and you're right, so standard program, big transformation, this is the bog standard kind of high level. At a very high level, get these things right and it should go okay. They never go perfectly, but it shouldn't be too painful. While you were talking, for me, it's the real change in transformation aspect isn't we're an incremental add to maybe new stakeholders or a new focus on stakeholders. These programs shouldn't even be big programs described the way they are. And this way we were talking at the beginning, it's that DNA, the way of thinking, the way of operating, starts to remove this type of program incremental delivery of steps forward. It should be a natural evolution of the system, the organization, the customer needs, the adoption of technology, the digital operating model. It should be more natural, whereas right now it is a strategic roadmap that takes us over the next year with these 7 projects, and we're going to do these things this way. That's the standard, typical way. And until the utility changes the underlying way of operating, that's how they'll be. But they're that way because of rate cases and because of linear budget models and because of long-standing silos of PMOs and the way of working and stage gates, right?
That's a difference in the digital world.
100%.
Regulators are no longer in control. The customers are in control.
Yep.
Now, in 2007, in the business that I was running, we said that customers would be empowered by 2020, they'd be putting solar on the roof, technology costs would be coming down, they'd be starting to escape the grid or substituting their energy requirements. All that happened.
Yep.
It took about 4 or 5 years for the people in the business to see it actually happening. Now, Australia's got around 25% penetration of solar across rooftops. They wouldn't change their views until they saw it actually happening. It was the customer's influence that changed their minds, not the regulators, not history, not their colleagues. It was the customers.
Yep.
That's why I think they've got to be in there.
I 100% agree. So other than this box, you're right, they permeate through this whole thing. But in a utility, you do have to worry about the regulator. And you know, the model, the financial model in which a utility operates obviously drives different decisions and approaches as well from a CFO perspective. So there's those competing challenges, absolutely. But I think there's a recognition, certainly from at the senior levels I deal with, there's a recognition, exactly as you said, you know, we can't sit around waiting for this to happen. It's going to happen. It's already happening.
How do you convince the regulator the world's changing? So in Hawaii, the regulator took the lead. In the US, you've got many regulators. In Australia, we've got one, which I'd say is influenced by the retail structure and competition. How do you change input from the regulator? How do you influence it?
My honest answer, good question, I don't know. I know multiple different clients we have, utilities that engage with regulators, and the regulators are different in every engagement, and they're different individuals. There was, some of them, if you've seen is it Sunny Patel, the head of Google? And he was up in front of Congress, and the senators were grilling him and just asking the stupidest questions because they just didn't understand the technology. So I think there's some regulators, and they're in the same boat. They've been in their job a long time. They don't get it. So it's a challenge. Okay, we're going to wrap up just because we're running out of time. Executive steering and reporting. So again, we build this pyramid on purpose. All of these things are important, but if you have great executive steering, ownership, and you don't have the rest below it, it's a house of cards, is really what that's trying to represent. The only thing I see happen a lot with executive steering, or executive engagement is there's a syndication of risk, is how I articulate it. There's a steering committee that really doesn't have one head or chair of it. They're all there and they all get to make a decision together, meaning if it's the wrong decision, they've syndicated the risk across all of them instead of there being one individual who's saying, this is what we're going to do and this is why. And that creates a challenge for decision making at the executive level and for accountability. Okay, that's the last one. We're at 2:15, which is when we're ending. I have my cards here if you want to copy the slides. Either take a card of mine or leave your card, and I'm happy to send them to you if you found them useful. Again, this structure is dead simple, but if you put this in front of some of your colleagues, maybe who weren't here today, and ask them to think through where the risks are, this is a really good way to hone in on some critical areas without getting lost in the noise of all the other little things that might be annoying or wrong with a big program of work. So I hope you found that useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.